term that works for when you bring a chagiga.
If it was a chag, we'd make kiddush.
What?
If it was a chag, we'd make kiddush, and there was no kiddush this morning.
No kiddush.
And
they were supposed to be.
No.
What happened? Nothing with that.
It was a virtual kiddush.
It was a virtual kiddush.
There was
No cake here.
It was virtual, no kiddush.
Poor Jackie. Something happened with the communication. Nobody prepared anything.
During your reign.
First time.
Pull me out, please.
I might have to impeach you.
Pull me out, he says. This is a deliberate.
No, just for that.
That'll be more appropriate. Good morning.
I don't know.
Okay, often when we're studying Parshas Behar, page 696, often as good Jews who go to classes and lectures and hear talks, we often are going to hear Dvar Torah, a Vor, an insight. At times we like to believe, and quite often we are actually hearing an insight into Torah. And we like that, we believe in it, we value it, it gives us meaning, it connects us to our past, to our tradition. There are times when you're going to hear a Vor of our Torah, an insight, that if you think about it, you are learning more about the person sharing it, or the authority who came up with it, more than you are learning the actual Torah. Okay? Sometimes the insight will really tell us what he is thinking, he, she, or whatever approach, whoever the party is. You're having more of an insight into the person than into the Torah. And I want to share with you an example in this week's Parsha of an insight of a great man. We will not take away from his greatness, but nevertheless the insight is going to give us a little bit of an understanding of a person and of a movement. That's what I'm trying to achieve. Now, this week's portion talks about the sabbatical year, the Shemitah. You work the land for 6 years, you rest on year 7. It is similar to the weekly cycle. We used to work, right? 6 days a week, and I can say this in the morning time. And day 7 you rest. Day 7 you rest. What is the idea of working and resting? Well, there is a bond. Well, I don't know about working 6 and resting 7, so you can explain it to me if you want.
I'd rather do witness.
So we're in the same ballpark. So 6 days humans connect to their work. Whatever you do, there's a connection, there's a bond there. Sometimes you control your work, sometimes your work controls you. Right? Sometimes you are on top of the hours, sometimes the hours are on top of you. There's a relationship there between humans and the workplace. Reality, welcome to human existence. Day 7, you are supposed to put that relationship on hold, and the goal is that day 7 should give you clarity why you are doing it. What's the purpose of this, of your toil? It's there for a reason. You live for a reason. Sometimes the workplace, the cycle, the 6-day cycle, can eat you up alive and you forget why you are doing it. Day 7, you get together with family, you get together with text, tradition, community, friends, and it gives you a reminder that, you know what, there's more to life than work. There's a purpose. There's an excellent project taking place. You could ask David Wolf more about it, called the Shabbat Project, which was done in South Africa, where they are getting as many Jews as possible to keep one Shabbat. And yes, done in South Africa, and there's a video, it's an 11-minute video about the Shabbat Project.
The Shabbos project.
It's the Shabbos Project?
Believe it or
Oh,
not.
interesting. So the Shabbos Project in South Africa, are there Lithuanians there? So. Right? Oh, you guys are Lithuanians. So the Shabbos Project is one where you're trying to bring Shabbos to the community, to the whole community, not just to Shabbat observant Jews. It succeeded there. Succeeded means it brought people out, interested, it's being discussed, and the chief rabbi of South Africa targeted a date where this Shabbos project will be done worldwide. And it's a wonderful project. You're involved in it. It's at Parshas Noah. They're trying to get people involved, interested. Wonderful indeed. Now, when they have this 11-minute video, so they interview South Africans about their experience on the Shabbat, and one of them is a little bit of a comedian. And he started saying that the benefit of keeping Shabbos was that he was able to focus and actually complete the conversation. And he says, because during the week, and then as he's doing it, you see him eyeing his phone. Excuse me, what was I saying again? In other words, he went back to communicating his message. His point was that during the week we are distracted. There are things that take over our life, especially in the modern era with technology, with all its gifts. It does indeed. You look at people of a younger, their 20s, 30s, 40s, and up to, but the reality is that it is mind-boggling to what extent that you could look at a group of people anywhere, bus, lecture, walking, unfortunately, that they're basically, it's impossible for them to function without it. The workplace takes over your life. Entertainment takes over your life. So we have one day that gives us some clarity. There's a relationship between humans and their phones. So too there was a relationship between the human and the land. A wonderful relationship, by the way. Right? You wake up in the morning, you're concerned about the welfare of the land. You work the land, you wait, you're patient, you wait for rain. That bond between humans and the field needs as well a time as a reminder that, you know what? There is a God. There's a purpose for it. There's a time when you rest, and that period of rest is supposed to give you clarity. That is the Shemitah year. In addition, in Jewish tradition, 50 symbolizes the idea of a freedom. There's a Jubilee year. Wonderful tradition, wonderful text, which we could read. We've addressed many, many different aspects of it. But what I want to go ahead and move forward to page 700. In Jewish tradition, there's great value for your ancestral field. Something, again, that we have lost. And the concept of roots, it is in some ways very, very depressing that here in Toronto, when you turn to someone and they say that, my mother was born in Toronto, you say, your mother was born in Toronto, you go, wow, right? You actually have someone here, right? A few of you, I think, have parents, right? Does anyone have here a grandparent born in Toronto?
Grandparent.
What? No one has a grandparent born in Toronto. Right? I'm sure there are those out there, but when you look at people who were born in the 40s, right, and meaning that you would have to place their grandparents on average in the 1890s when there were less than 1,500 Jews here, you don't have that, right? So what kind of roots do you have? What kind of roots do we have? Well, this generation is a generation that manages feeling permanence by being somewhere already, 5 years. That's a reality that exists in this day and age. In the past, there were roots. In Europe, you had people that would tell you that I've been in this community for 600 years. My uncle would share with me that he, as a child, grew up in northern Italy, where his father was a rabbi there. Northern Italy, areas around Venice, Padua, Trieste, right? That's a region that European rabbis would actually go there. They had their own fascinating Italian rabbis as well, but there were European rabbis that would go there. And they had shuls there that were 600-700 years old that were functioning. And he says that Simchat Torah, they had the tradition of taking out all the Sifrei Torah, right? They didn't have to deal with one questionable Sefer Torah. They had to deal with dozens upon dozens of Sifrei Torah. And there were chambers within the Aron Kodesh that the Shamash would take off his shoes and climb in, and you wouldn't see him, and then he would come back from one of the back chambers within the Aron Kodesh to bring out a Sefer Torah that is hundreds of years old. you felt a connection to the past, right? You are pulling out a Sefer Torah that was used 500 years ago in that community. There's a concept of roots. Roots reminds the person who they are. You feel roots, you feel a connection. It is something that makes a tremendous contribution to our identity, which we cannot really relate to. We don't have that here. In the land of Israel, the Almighty wants us to keep and hold on to our ancestral fields. If it belonged to your family, you don't sell it. You know the story of King Achav? There was a king called Achav, and next to an area he owned, there was an individual by the name of Nevot, and Nevot had a field. The king in the Jezreel Valley. And the king comes to him and says, I want your field. And Nevot says, what are you? It's an ancestral field. You can't sell that. There was an understanding that the field connects us to the past. And it is, in the language of the Torah, in Eretz Achuzah. Do not sell it. Now, there are times that unfortunately you have to sell it. So the Torah makes it clear that the sale is not a permanent sale. It is, in essence, a lease. And therefore, the pricing of fields, when they are sold, with an understanding that come the year of the Jubilee, every 50 years, fields are going to return to their original owners. So there's an awareness, any transaction taking place, the court system had tables put together by actuaries. And they would go ahead and assess the size of the field, the location, and what date it is. And based on the date, right, we had mathematicians too in the past, based on the date and how many years are left to the Jubilee, that would determine the price. So every transaction would have an understanding, things are not permanent. Right? The goal is that you return to the original owner because the original owner is the one that sees it. It connects him to the time that the people of Israel entered into the land of Israel. The days of Yehoshua, the days when they settled, the days they left the wilderness, the days when the Torah was completed. So they are linked with their land to the text that gives them identity. That was the land of Israel. Eretz Achuzah. Extremely significant. Now, sales at times had to take place. But family members were recommended, it was considered a mitzvah, to do a redemption. That if someone indeed has to sell his land, family members try to the best of their ability to raise funds to try to bring it back into the family. They wanted to keep land in the domain of a specific family because it meant that they kept together, they understood their identity, their link to the past. So if you turn to page 700, which is chapter 28, and when God tells us, in verse 23, remember, Haaretz lo timacher litzmitut. Never, the sale of land in Israel is not perpetual, but rather you have to understand, Kili haaretz, land belongs to me, God says. I gave it to you, I want you to relate to me. It's chapter 28, verse 23. And you are gerim v'toshavim atem imadi. Yes, you are people who settle in the land, but there's also this sojourn element that you are not a permanent resident there. Your relationship is more with me. Verse 24. Ubechol eretz achuzatchem, in the entire land of your achuzah. The word achuzah comes from the word ochez in modern Hebrew. When you ochez an item, it means you are holding an item. So we are told in verse 24 that in any land that you are ochez, achuzatchem, translated by Art Scroll as your ancestral heritage, Geula titnu la'aretz. Be sure, whenever possible, to provide redemption for the land. And it is described in the verses that follow. That if a brother becomes impoverished and needs to sell the land, family members should kick in. Try to bring a Geula la'aretz. In your eretz, in your land of achuzatchem. That's a key verse here in the text. Now, I'm going to share with you an insight of a rabbi. The rabbi is Rav Tzadok HaKohen from Lublin, a great 19th century Hasidic thinker, one who made a tremendous contribution to the 20th century, 21st century, to Judaism. He focuses a lot on the concept of relationship between humans and Hashem, Jews and Hashem. You have to have a relationship. And he talks about the idea that at times you develop a closer relationship to Hashem after stumbling. In other words, after you sin and you feel the gap and the distance and the emptiness due to the fact that you're not close to Hashem, when you reconnect, the kesher, the connection, the tie, the bond is much stronger. So it comes out that sin is not something that we should bemoan. It comes out that really sin is something we should celebrate, because it's as a result of the fact that you stumbled, you have a closer relationship with Hashem. Our goal in life is not to do good and act like robots that get marks on grades. Our goal is a relationship. The relationship is stronger after you fall. These are encouraging words, especially when it comes to a time like Elul, and people focus on self-improvement. And they start looking through and thinking through their mistakes throughout the year, and they are devastated. But if they take the approach that actually these mistakes could lead me towards a stronger bond and connection to God, they are encouraging. So kesher, connection with God, that's a very Hasidic statement, that we have to focus on a relationship with God, not just the mitzvot on their own. Don't become one who fears the Shulchan Aruch. Be one who fears God. Have a relationship not with the laws, have a relationship with the God of the laws. These are beautiful insights that he shares, extremely significant, and indeed a man that made a great contribution. But he has a reading in this verse that is different. It's a different type of reading, but it will provide some level of clarity into Hasidic insight and Hasidic behavior. You know, today, in the state of Israel, they are celebrating the 66th anniversary. And as I mentioned here, to everyone, 66 is young, right? Everyone in the shul agrees with me that 66 is a young age. And therefore, as a young person, things are not perfect yet, they have not matured. We could expect our nation not to come to its full maturity yet. And therefore, when there are problems there, they are problems of growth, right, of youth. The achievements are one that we are extremely proud of. There's tremendous pride that we take in anything that relates to our state. There's tremendous pride that we take in the fact that the nature itself is coming alive there. You see satellite pictures that compare the amount of trees after the Turks chopped any tree around to build their railways. You see the amount, you compare forestry of the year 1920, the forestry of the year 2014, and you are amazed, the only country in the world, right, where you are increasing the number of trees. It's an unbelievable accomplishment on so many levels. Toronto feels proud today because the winner of the Chidon HaTanach is a student from Or HaChaim. And that's a big challenge for a young boy or a young girl from outside of Israel to compete against the Israelis is a challenge, but Or HaChaim achieved it. And when they announced it, Amos, someone with a smartphone could look up the exact name, a young man, Eitan Amos. Eitan Amos. A young man, it's a tremendous, getting there is an accomplishment, winning it is an incredible accomplishment. One thing I did see is that when they informed that he is the winner from Or HaChaim Toronto, a place that always sends top good-notch kids, and this is in front of, you know, the whole Jewish world is watching it. Wonderful achievements. We are proud. Wonderful indeed, no question about it. But when we start studying the history of Jews making their way to Israel, we realize that there was a shift that occurred about 120, 130 years ago, when Jews have always made it a dream to enter Eretz Yisrael, not just recently. If you would analyze Jewish tradition, Jewish texts, Jewish thinkers in the 13th century, you would realize that it would be considered a dream to see Eretz Yisrael, to live in Eretz Yisrael. The goal for many was that at the end of their life, if they are able to make their way there and die in the land of Israel, it's a spiritual accomplishment to be buried in the land, to live your last days in Eretz Yisrael. The goal was, let's make our way to Israel to die there. Right? The famous story, right, of the guy that's it's old, that's dying, and he asks his children to take him to Israel, and it was a very difficult journey. He was not a healthy person. He makes it to the land of Israel, and lo and behold, Eretz Yisrael does wonders, and he got better. And he called his children back, and he said, get me back to the States. I came here, I want to die in Israel, I don't want to live here, right? That was the old approach. Things changed 120 years ago when there's a desire to actually not just die there, but live there, build, right? Farming, produce things, not just live off the funds that are coming from Chutz La'aretz, which existed, a system that existed for centuries, but actually produce things in the land of Israel. Komamiyut, yeah. So overwhelming challenges exist, and we read about the stories, drawing the swamps, malaria, the dealing with the Arabs. Even before there were Zionist movements, the Arabs acted like animals. There are stories in Sfat in the 1850s where you had these Bedouin groups. The challenges are overwhelming, but there was a desire, there was an urge to make changes, to go ahead and live in the land, number one, and adjustment number two. And in the past, all thoughts of entering the land were as individuals. Suddenly there was a thought that we should enter it as communities, right? Because when you are establishing a community, there's a need for others there as well. If you would be traveling in the year 1750 to Israel, your concern was, what association or what funding can I get from a tzedakah fund in Israel to live there my last days? When you would be traveling in the year 1902, you would be thinking, who can I join? What kind of gathering, what kind of moshava, kibbutz can I join and actually make my contribution to that society? A major shift takes place. But something quite perplexing is occurring. The Jews who have been praying their whole life for a return to Israel were not involved in this movement. The Jews who, unfortunately, were no longer praying were the ones involved in the movement. Something that was perplexing, something that always fascinates me, of the way Jews thought and how they behaved. Visiting, my dream, I mentioned this several times, my dream would be to hear a conversation taking place in 1904 between yeshiva students trying to figure out what to do. It's a complex reality. Land of Israel is incredible. It's so much part of our tradition. But yet, those building it are people that don't value our tradition. Do we join them because what they are doing is incredible? Or do we not join them because their philosophies and their intentions are, on the surface at least, not based on the values of Torah? There are many, many statements that are quoted from leaders of Zionism, that their goal was to put an end to the old Jew and create a new Jew. These are statements that are not ones that we are proud of. They are ones that perplex us because, again, these are Jews that are doing the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, but at the same time not valuing tradition. How do we deal with it? So this was the question of the day. And we know very well that there were movements that believed that we could join them and hopefully have an impact on them. Join the secular movement, but let's do it. Let's go ahead and encourage Aliyat Eretz Yisrael and building in Eretz Yisrael, but Al Pi Torat Yisrael. We call that movement, it's known today as the Mizrahi. Rabbi Reines, great rabbinic authorities were involved. Rabbi Kook in many ways believed in it. He had his own different adjustments, but his philosophy took over the identity of religious Zionism. Did they succeed? I personally believe that to some extent, yes, because if you look at the army in the early days of the state and the amount of people that served in the army that were believers in the Kadosh Baruch Hu, believers that this is a land that's given to us by God, and compare the numbers to what's taking place today, you would be amazed. I don't have the statistics, but you could probably look it up. And it indicates that the movement that says, you know what, let's be involved, let's go ahead and involve ourselves. And we are going to involve ourselves and make sure that we are doing it for the sake of the Ribono Shel Olam. They are having an impact as well. We all heard stories how before they are entering Gaza in 2009, you have the religious soldiers inspiring the other ones. They are turning to them, let's pray together. So that is considered a success story because you are joining them. You are not joining them letting and allowing their philosophy to impact you. You are joining them with intention of changing what they want. But it was a struggle that existed, a question that existed in many, many circles in the last decade of the 19th and the first decades of the 20th century. Among one of the individuals who wasn't sure, why is it that we the religious Jews are not playing a role, was actually a Hasidic rabbi. A Hasidic rabbi. He is known by some as the Hasidic, the only Hasidic Tzioni, they call him. In other words, a Hasidic master, an Admor, who was actually a Zionist. His name was Rabbi Chaim Israel from Pilov. Chaim Israel from Pilov. He came from the dynasty of Kotsk, which was Kotzkers.
Where's Pilov? What country?
It's a suburb of the Warsaw area. Okay. So Reb Chaim Israel from Pilov, his last name was, I think, Morgenstern. He wrote letters to rabbis, and this is taking place around the year 1905. And in one of his letters, he is struggling with an issue. And he writes the following. And Nifleti, he wonders, Madua, why? And I'm reading his words. Lo ala alibam zot. Why is it that earlier generations did not allow their hearts, why did it not even come into their heart? Sheishtadlu, that they should play their role. They should do hishtadlut al yeshivat eretz hakodesh, on settling the land of Israel with anashim sherim. And if that will be done, he notes, it should, without a doubt, have an impact on the coming of the Mashiach. And if they can't themselves be the ones to roll up their sleeves and begin the process of building the land, at least they should be supporters. Hamitaskim b'mitzvah. Why a Hasidic Rebbe sitting there knows the value of Eretz Yisrael, knows the value of working the land. There's an opportunity. He sees Jews returning. Right, by 1905, you know that there are Jews returning. Why are we not? He goes out into the streets of Warsaw, and he sees these wonderful Hasidic yeshivas and shtivos and Torah Jews. Everything's amazing. But why are we not involved in getting ourselves there? He doesn't understand it. And this Hasidic Rebbe, by asking these questions, is actually looking for answers within himself. And he starts working and trying to organize things. And he even does something very shocking. He has a meeting with Rabbi Reines from the Mizrahi. So you have a Hasidic Rebbe, where in general, they were very critical of the Mizrahi for having a conversation even with secular Jews like Herzl, Weizmann, and Jabotinsky. And here comes a Hasidic Rebbe, and is meeting him because he wants to join. He feels we have to be part of it. Okay? This is what's taking place. Now, I ask, why is it really that the land of Israel, it seems to be among Hasidic circles, at least at that point, was not on the top of their agenda? It was not. 1905, interview Hasidic Jews and Hasidic Rebbes. The land of Israel was important. There's no question about it. But it's not number one. And what I believe is that in some ways, yes, there were Hasidic people who made their way to Eretz Yisrael. There was a Menachem Mendel from Vitebsk that opened the community in Eretz Yisrael. They loved Eretz Yisrael. But the essence of Hasidim was that there was a new revelation that took place towards the end of the 18th century. And they view that period of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid of Mezrich and his stories as a new revelation that somehow elevated the mountains of the Carpathians. When Rabbi Tursky, a person I respect and love, and when he heard that Miriam, my wife, was born in the Carpathian mountains, he was like, wow, like the Baal Shem Tov walked around those areas, right? That's like an incredible thing. Carpathian mountains, Ukraine, right? For me, coming from a different background, right? It sickens me to even hear the name Ukraine. I think of the massacres of 1648. I think of the massacres of 1941. These are animals, these people. Animals, what they did. If you look, there's even footage, unfortunately, that they have. These are things that are disturbing. That's how I look at Ukraine. But for a Hasidic Jew, and again, these are people not in any way putting them down, I'm just trying to assess a philosophy. For them, what do you mean? The Baal Shem Tov walked in those places. That was an approach that existed. It elevated the significance of the era, and therefore the garb. What's considered a Yiddish garb, right? What's a Yiddish garb? A shtramel and with socks that go over the pants. Why? Well, the shtramel, because the wealthy wore those types of hats towards the end of the 18th century. And the socks, because if you were wealthy and you wanted to keep your pants clean, so when you were going down the road that was muddy, like Patricia, you would put the sock over your pants. So that was a sign that I care about my pants. The poor person doesn't care one bit about his pants if they get dirty or clean. The wealthy person who has to walk indoor and has to walk around with clean pants has to put it. But that was done during the era of the revelation of the Baal Shem Tov, so that becomes significant. The garb becomes significant. The authorities of that era become significant. And even the location becomes significant. That's what occurs, okay? With that, I will share you the insight of Reb Tzadok. One other piece of information you have to keep in mind, that the concept of redemption plays a big role among Hasidim. We have the responsibility, according to Hasidic thinking, to go ahead, do mitzvos in places, and what we do is we are taking sparks out of that fell. There was some kind of event in the spiritual realm that holy sparks fell everywhere throughout the world. And when we do good deeds, we collect those sparks. There are souls that are part of that spark eruption. And therefore, when you convert people who are interested in Judaism, you bring them into, you are fixing the world by bringing in these sparks. They're doing tikkunim, fixes. They're very big into fixes, the Hasidim. I don't mean coffee. I mean fixes in the spiritual realm. They label that as a geula, a redemption, because there's a holy spark that was in a holy place. When the world was created, it fell into the Carpathian mountains. By the Baal Shem Tov teaching Torah there and sharing stories with people and talking about God, he collects those sparks, and the sparks have a geula, a redemption. Comes Reb Tzadok. Let's go back to this verse. Verse 24 on page 700, which is in chapter 25. Says Reb Tzadok, Ubechol eretz achuzatchem. You should know, the concept of redemption and returning to God is not just in Israel. Bechol is a very inclusive statement. Eretz achuzatchem, any land that you take hold of. Achuzah, that you take hold. Geula, your goal is to bring a redemption to the land by doing the mitzvos and by teaching Torah. Wherever you are in the world, the Shekhinah is there. God is everywhere. And your goal is to go ahead and find sparks and redeem those sparks wherever you are. Reb Tzadok takes a verse that relates to Eretz Yisrael, and he applies it to what? To the world, to Poland, to Ukraine, to Galicia. Why? Well, you have to understand that Jews of the 18th century who can't make it to Israel, they need something to encourage them that there's God here. That's what the Hasidic movement achieved. God is everywhere, which is of course true. But they elevate the here and the now, and at times will take a text which is clearly talking about the land of Israel and will apply it to everywhere. And this is a little bit of a Hasidic creation that elevates the period, elevates the location, But unfortunately, yes, it was necessary to inspire them that there's God everywhere. But when the time was coming that, kol dodi dofek, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is giving these little signs, little sounds, that you know what? Start coming back. Right, Balfour Declaration, San Ramon 1920, when there were people that were in tune with the new times, like the Meshach Chochmah or Meir Simcha, that says, now get your act together. And if you were tuning into God in 1920, and again, we're not judging anyone. We're looking back because we have clarity now. But the reality is that these great rabbis were saying, you know what? 1920, get your act together. Something great is happening. The realities are realities. But the message is that it was a tremendous gift from above that began during that period. And if you have an approach that there's tremendous value outside of Israel, necessary in the 18th century, but not so helpful in the 1920s, when if we could go back and yell at the people of the world, that's what we would be crying out to them. Get out of there. Get out of there. What can we do? It's painful. It's overwhelming to even think about it. To tell you the end of the story of Rabbi Chaim Yisrael from Pilov. He got involved in his movement, right? He got involved in trying to inspire people. And then a few tragedies fell upon his family. A daughter passed away, his wife passed away, and he no longer was actively involved in trying to bring the Mizrahi way of thinking to his Hasidic followers. So there are two versions of what happened exactly. There's the version that's mentioned in Hasidic circles, but those who did a little bit more of research have a different explanation. In Hasidic circles, they say that he saw it as signs from above, not to go ahead and be part of an operation that is tainted by an association to secular Jews. He saw the passing as a sign. That's how it was shared. But people who studied him and studied the history and letters and create a very different picture. He actually, for the rest of his life, wanted to join, to continue. But he had tremendous pressure from family members, including his children, who begged him, who tried to prevent him to the best of their ability of being associated. The attitude in Poland was, you cannot be associated with Mizrahi. And he himself shared with people that I see indeed that there was a sign from above, and I was punished. Because the Talmud tells us that if someone starts a mitzvah and does not complete it, he will, lo aleinu, lose family members, a very harsh statement, and these are people that are very spiritual. He saw it as a sign from above that due to the fact that he did not complete the mission, that's why the Ribono Shel Olam punished. Meaning he had such a tremendous agenda to go ahead and have an impact, to change the culture, the way of thinking of Polish Yidden in 1905. And imagine the impact it could have had in 1905 that other people would have joined him. That by 1917, 1920, they would have been ready to roll. Think about what could have been. So he said it's a punishment from above that I was a maschil b'mitzvah, but did not complete it. It's a realm that we don't understand, but it's something that when we look back, we have a level of clarity. There's a pasuk in Tehillim, Elokim Yoshiat Zion ve'ivne arei Yehuda. The Almighty is going to go ahead and save Zion, build the cities of Yehuda. V'yeshvu sham v'yirashua. We're going to sit there and settle there. V'zera avadav. The seed, the descendants of his slaves, the slaves of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yinchalu are going to inherit it. Ve'ohavei Shema, and those who love him, Yeshvu ba, will settle there. Now what's considered a higher level of a Jew? The person who is a descendant of a slave of God, or one who actually loves God? Which one? What's on a higher level? A descendant of someone who actually served God as a slave. Meaning, you know what it means to serve God as a slave? I really don't want to do this. But what can I do? What's Kenef done? It's Pesach, I can't eat the bread, right? That's a slave. And who are we being told comes to the land of Israel? Zerah, children of people who had that attitude. They're mentioned first in the verse. Afterwards, the verse mentions, Ohavei Shmo, people who actually love him, Yishkenu ba. Says Reb Chaim Yisrael from Pilov that this verse is talking about an era. That the first people, the first wave of builders of Israel are actually going to be Zera Avadav. They're not going to be people that are coming with the love of Hashem or even knowledge of Hashem. They will be descendants of those who served God. Though that's going to be the first wave. But after that, who's going to join? Right? Who's going to go ahead and join and actually benefit, right, from what the Tziyonim did? The Ohavei Shemo, people that actually love Hashem. And he said that now it's our turn, the Ohavei Hashem, the Ohavei Shmo, to join in the journey and appreciate the land and build it. He wasn't able to do it, but those of us that may do our part and appreciate it, do remember him on this day. Thank you for listening. Yes?
Do you see a similarity between what happened in the late 1800s and early 1900s with Zionism and the time, 2,500 years ago with Ezra returning, I don't know how many years ago it was, with Ezra returning to Eretz Yisrael with like a ragtag group. And the main religious type stayed in Bavel.
There's a story in the Talmud that Rish Lakish met a Jew from Bavel. And he said, now Rish Lakish, we're talking about someone that lives in the 3rd century. So we're talking about someone that lives about 600-700 years after Ezra. And he sees a Babylonian Jew and he says, I hate you guys from Bavel. Why do you hate us? He said, if you would have joined Ezra, right, this second temple would have been the final one. You guys stayed with your comfort, believing that, Bavel is the place to be. So it fell apart, it collapsed. Now, the similarities are that unfortunately, Jews don't wake up. Who do we remember? The great rabbis that stayed back in Bavel when they rebuilt the second temple, we don't know who they are really, many of them. They're not people that had an impact on our identity and on our history. Ezra, the minority who understood the significance and made his way to Eretz Yisrael, is someone that we value, thousands of years later. There's no question that there are similarities between the two. The difference is that this one began the same way, 1890, 1904, 100% there are great similarities. But the difference is that the Rebbeinu Shalom, in a sad way, but the reality is that look what's happening in Israel. Meaning, Bavel always retained a majority. During the Second Temple period, the majority of Jews were outside of Israel. During this process of rebuilding, we Baruch Hashem have a majority of Jews in Israel, right? So it began with the same way, with a weak representation of the people, but it built in a magnificent way, right? That when in 1948, 66 years ago, you had 600,000 Jews in Israel. And now, Baruch Hashem, you have, over 6 million. It's mind-boggling, right, what was achieved over 66 years, and it indicates that this is something that's different. There's a tradition, I heard it from very reliable people in the name of the Vilna Gaon, that Churban Shlishi, and I heard this not just from religious Zionists, I heard it from Haredi elements, so it's a very reliable statement, a tradition that the Vilna Gaon gave to his disciples. Churban Shlishi lo yeh, meaning, there's concerns, and if you were there at the bite last night, it's an island surrounded by enemies, but we have a promise. The promise was a return, and a tradition that this is, God willing, the beginning of the process of a very significant one. So we value it, we appreciate it, but it's one that comes with a responsibility. In other words, when you come home and there's a mess at home, you don't just say, okay, what can I do? There's a mess. You try to clean it. I don't know about you, but in other words, there are people that roll up their sleeves and do their part to clean it. We have to have that attitude towards Eretz Yisrael. In other words, there are things that are bothering us. There's, the values are, not where they're supposed to be. But therefore, we are associated with those who do roll up their sleeves and are making a difference there. And we value such organizations, and we consider it a priority to support such people, the ones that are making a change, the ones that are having an impact. So I talk about the Nachal HaCharedi. Over why? That, I believe, is a movement that is making that contribution, that is taking people that are in environments that are not yet playing that significant role, and are converting them. And if you look in the media is appreciating it, because if you look today, one of the pictures they have from Israel is the president of Israel welcoming some 100 soldiers who have achieved things throughout the year. And one of them is a nice from a Yid with Shana Payas and Abort, but wearing the Madim and serving the country. And that's something that makes us proud, because he is one of those people that, yes, he's holding on to his traditions. He did not cut his Payas. Right? That was always the concept, that the army was viewed. I mean, if you would visit a yeshiva 60 years ago, maybe not 60, but 40 years ago, and you would say to them, the army, a treifa makom. Why is it a treifa makom? Because you cut your payas there, right? Baruch Hashem, it's not a reality. In 1967, when they conquered Sinai, so Life magazine sent a photographer down, and I think it was even the cover of Life magazine right after the 6-Day War. Was a Hasidic Jew, a Hasidic Yid with payas, peeking out of the tank. It was a Greenfeld. I know because I know his sister very well. So Greenfeld was a unique. The photographer was taking pictures, but he was so shocked that here Israeli soldiers have their specific appearance, and suddenly a Hasidic Yid comes out of the tank. For him, it was shocking, and he took a picture of it. Today, right, it's something we take pride in. It's no longer shocking to see Yidden. You walk through Yerushalayim, and you look. There's so many examples. Things are better, but it's a better with a responsibility that we play a role in appreciating both. We could bring both together if we appreciate to get the traditions, appreciate the payas, and appreciate the dort, but appreciate also the madim, the fatigues at the same time. And those who are bringing them together are doing a tremendous mitzvah. Yes?
Are there halachic changes that take place when the majority of Jews live in Eretz Yisrael?
So there's a question with the Rambam and Trumas and Maestras, when there's a majority there, does it have to be with the representatives of all tribes? We are still in the middle of things. Okay, in other words, we haven't had the complete clarity, because it's only based on one reading in the Rambam. Based on one reading in the Rambam, if indeed you have the majority of Jews, some of the laws become Torah law. Yes, but it's unclear, because according to others, there has to be representatives of all tribes, and that we cannot verify. But the excitement and the significance is there. Thank you for listening, and I'm sorry for keeping you longer. Have a wonderful Yom Tov.